Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Ojo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we are going over match day 10 of the Canadian Premier League. We're already 10 match days into the season. Feels like just yesterday that we were so excited for the season to be starting, and now we are 10 full weeks in, and things are starting to shape up a little bit. We're starting to see some teams pull away, some teams kind of linger towards the bottom. But this week we had a couple of, you could say, upsets in terms of what's going on in the table. So we're going to jump into everything that happened, all the drama, all the goals, and the heartbreak for some.
Yeah.
But before we go into it, remember to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, as well as finding us on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube under the same name. Now, before we jump into all of the action, I do want to just have a quick word about some of the news that just came out today at the time of recording, which is on Tuesday, which was about the CPL and MediaPro. It was just released, a statement a few hours ago, that the Canadian Soccer Business, CSB, and the media group, MediaPro, reached a settlement. After all of the drama that we had, remember that emergency meeting that we had earlier in January that was a little bit doom and gloom? Well, it seems things have been patched up. And yeah, it seems like mom and dad made up and we might have a happy ending after all. We didn't get too many details. We just got a statement from Mark Noonan saying, "We are pleased to have reached this agreement with MediaPro in the best interest of soccer in Canada. With the 2026 FIFA World Cup less than 2 years away, this settlement would allow us to continue delivering the best Canadian soccer content to fans from coast to coast." Shout out.
There we go.
As we build towards the biggest sporting event on the planet. Now, I didn't only wanted to read that out so I could say that the president shouted out coast to coast, but also because that likely means that they have a new agreement in the works, because one of the whole thing is that they, with the lawsuits filed, they broke that agreement, that like legal thing was done. So now what that to me sounds, it's like, okay, they're going to be working on some new partnerships, or at least, a reworking of the partnership that they had for at least the next 2 seasons, including not including this one, until to the 2026 World Cup. So it seems like the storm has sort of passed, and I mean it's great news, because we knew that they quickly patched things up for this season, but we were kind of left in limbo about what happened this season. Does this come a little bit of a relief to you, Mike, and to maybe all of the other fans across the country?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, more will come out, obviously, but your gut reaction sort of says, well, I guess both parties have decided actually we're not going to be better off if we separate. Like, we need to work out something. What we planned on at first hasn't come about, and rather than getting angry about it, let's try and come up with a new way to things change. Like, this is a young league. Like, things have changed. That what they hoped for maybe hasn't been possible on both sides. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, we'll obviously go into the last game of the season, last game of the weekend, and a few of the other bits where we can see some of the bits that the CPL will likely be doing going forward. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see MediaPro's sort of change of sort of attack on trying to build up that sort of viewership.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of interested to see specifically on MediaPro's side what their strategy changes to maybe get more eyes in the league. Do they now reach out to some of the more bigger service providers or broadcasters in the country? We saw, the newly announced Northern Super League, the women's team, securing some massive, broadcasting deals with major broadcasting companies in Canada. So maybe the CPL and MediaPro are going to try to look to do something maybe a little bit similar in the coming years, especially with the 2026 World Cup coming. I feel like it's a perfect opportunity. And now that you have the opportunity to reach a new settlement or reach a new agreement and kind of rehash things out, I think hopefully that means that on MediaPro's side, they can find more eyes to get onto the league. And on the league side, they can find more interested parties who will actually commit to creating clubs and creating sustainable clubs. And we'll talk about, the maybe specifics about that when we get to the final match of the weekday. But overall, I think it's good news. Hopefully, it is something that we can sort of now close that chapter and put away as something like, oh, remember when that happened? That was hilarious and slightly terrifying for Canadian soccer. But yeah, as we get more news, obviously we will get it to you as quickly as possible. We'll have a chat about it. But for now, happy days in the Canadian Premier League. What it wasn't happy days for, though for a little while it was for Valour FC in the very first match on the Friday game. A thrilling match, probably the most exciting match of the weekend. We were sort of spoiled at the beginning with this kind of match. I thought that this was like, if this was going to be set the tone for the weekend, it was going to be one to remember. But yeah, 5-goal thriller between Valour FC and Pacific FC. In the end, it was Pacific that edged out the home side 3-2. For the goals, Sean Young opened his account with a penalty in the 19th minute before Tico Veanu made it 2-0 in the 33rd. Sean Hundle finally scored for Valour at the time of the first half in the 47th minute. Before Jordy Swivel scored in 63rd to continue his fine goal-scoring form. But unfortunately, I think Hundle might have confused his own goal for the opposition goal, because in the 75th minute, he nodded a fantastic header into the back of his own net to give Pacific the lead, and by the end, all 3 points. Now, Mike, obviously not the result that I know you would have wanted in this one, but overall, what a match. 5 goals, plenty of opportunities, and it was a little bit of a strange sight at the beginning, because we saw Pacific and Valour kind of field teams that either they were forced to, or it was a new direction that they were looking for, but it was a little bit unorthodox on both sides, because for Valour, we saw Jordy Swivel, Hundal, and Binate all start, and they're all strikers. And we saw Hundal out wide again, which I didn't think we were going to see after everything that happened with Vancouver FC last season. And also Pacific, without either of their starting goalkeepers. They had to do a short-term replacement goalkeeper agreement with Daniel Zadravec, who is a U Sports goalkeeper. And they also didn't have Quintana because of that red card that we saw. And they didn't have Eamon Salouf, who was also unavailable. So looking at everything that I just mentioned of the team selection, did you expect this match to kind of not be as maybe exciting as it turned out to be?
Well, there's something about Valour at home now. Like I'm really like to give the club and the fan base a bit of a credit. The numbers coming through the doors since they've been able to come back to Valour does look back to Winnipeg does look great. Like they got the crowd behind them, and that's helped them get spurred on for those 2-goal comeback to bring it back to 2-2. And I think they're looking at this team now, and they've ditched the back three, which is a great thing. Like absolutely fantastic. Antonoglu is still flying forward, like so he's got the energy to do that from left back. He doesn't have to play left wing back. He's up and down, and I think it's the bringing getting Ohim back from injury gives you that little bit more of comfort to play a double pivot, because Diogo's been fantastic as well. We're gonna stick with Diogo playing in that sort of number 10. So they look like, well, we're going to concede goals, let's just try and score some. And from the Pacific side, great to have Rion Moore back. They had to go out, like they know they know Zadravec, he's been training with them obviously, but they know they've got to go out, and they know they've got to start scoring goals, and they need to start winning games a bit more. So I guess that's sort of built up to two sides who both really needed to go out and find the net a few times.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. Both sides kind of threw a little bit of caution to the wind, maybe in ways that they didn't necessarily want to, but we got a cracking game out of it. Because if you look at the first half, I mean, Valour being the home side, having a little bit of wind under the sails. Yes, they lost to Ottawa, but they still had a pretty decent performance, and they've had pretty good performances at home. You know, the win against Vancouver a couple of weeks ago. I expected them to start with a little bit more organization, a little bit more clarity in what they were doing, but there were just too many mistakes in that opening half. It's something that, I mean, you mentioned it last week. They were just a band of misfits trying to figure it all together. And that's what it looked like in the first half. Just a little bit of a band of plucky misfits trying to fight against a really well-organized, well-oiled machine that Pacific looked in that first half. And they pretty much allowed Pacific to dominate for 45 minutes up until Sean Hundel's goal at the end. But for you, looking at that first half performance, were you a little bit worried that this was the old Valour and not the Valour we had sort of seen in the last few weeks?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, there's big question marks over Chansopoulos at the back, who's got a mistake in him, but he's also incredibly flat-footed so often. Like, he doesn't react quickly enough. And when you have defenders like, and Mordekudis isn't the fastest, so you've got that little bit of worry there. What you want behind them is a goalkeeper who's calm-headed, who can like organise the events. And Viscosi just really doesn't want to be that guy. So it throws up so much in this team that I think that's why Phil Dos Santos, like, and I'm loving. I think like everyone should be all for this. He's just gone, let's just be really attacking them because we're going to concede goals.
Yeah, I mean, Viscosi, sometimes, like, to be fair, like, there has been times this season where he's come to Valour's rescue.
Yeah.
But then this game was just an absolute, like, he had a mare in the first 20 minutes, just two howlers back to back. The first one went pretty much unpunished. The second one couldn't do it again, gave away that penalty. Just with goalkeepers, I feel like when you see that happen, it's because they either hesitate to get out when they should, and because of the hesitation, they arrive late, or they just come out without thinking about it. They kind of like a rush of blood to the head. They just go straight out and they don't think about the situation because it wasn't like he was in an extremely dangerous situation. It was basically almost at the edge of the box. Like, you didn't need to come out in that manner, but I don't know. He just decided to steamroll him.
Partway through, thought, "Oh God, I've committed," and like didn't realize he could stop.
Exactly, and then he kind of went through like a linebacker in the NFL, and it was a very silly penalty to give away, and Sean Young very well dispatched in the penalty, and at that point was 1-0. I thought, okay, well, we've seen Valour be able to come back with this. I mean, I wasn't expecting the way that they came back, but I didn't count them out. But then when the second goal went in, I thought, especially with the defense, I thought this might be it, because what is that defense doing in that situation? But for Chicoveanu to be able to put that away. What about you? What was your reaction to that second goal?
Yeah, that's it again. It's just people they're just watching. Like, they're not. You haven't got central defenders there that are going up to win the ball and trying to make their the penalty box like it's their zone, and you've got to fight us for it, which we'll come on to in other teams as well this week. But they're just not confident enough. They don't want to take. They can't take ownership from the other team about these zones, and they're just reacting constantly. They're never in control, and those goals like this are going to keep happening.
Yeah, and at that point, it was like, I thought for me, I was like, okay, this is probably over then, just because of it felt so disappointing. The way that Valour came out, like, you could see their heads drop as soon as the first goal went in. It felt like the heads were dropping again after the second goal, and we've seen this with Valour at times where they struggle to dig themselves out of holes that they themselves have dug for themselves. And so it was a little bit of a tough watch, especially since they were all self-inflicted. Like, all of the basically all of the opportunities and the goals that conceded were pretty much self-inflicted. You know, still credit for Pacific. You got to put the chances away, that even if they are sort of gift wrapped to you.
Should have had more as well. I mean, Josh Hurd was so upset with himself when
he was fuming, he was smashing the floor. It looked like he was hitting himself on the head. yeah, it was just showing deep frustration with himself for missing that point blank header. But yeah, it could have definitely been worse, and arguably should have been worse for Valour. And I think if it would have been 3 or 4-0 at halftime, I don't think anybody on Valour side could say that they were unlucky. I feel like that's exactly what they deserved at that moment, because they were just all over the place defensively and in possession, so sloppy. But they managed to find from somewhere, I don't know where they pulled it from, but they managed to find a response right at the end of the first half, a fantastic cross by Diogo. Diogo, that's what we're going with again. To find Sean Hundle at the back. It was, I don't know if TMG could have done much better. It was a little bit unfortunate in Pacific, because I felt like TMG, his little flick to try to get on the end of it, actually took Data Luke out of it. I think Data Luke was reading the ball, and if TMG didn't get it, I think Data Luke would have actually been able to deal with it. But because he kind of flicked it on, it went over the head of Data Luke that wasn't expecting the flight of the ball to change, and then fell perfectly for Sean Hundle. And finally for Sean, he gets his goal. Obviously, he kind of cancels it out later, but at least he got that first goal in the right net. And for me, it was a matter of time, because thankfully for Valour, they do have an informed forward right now, which is Jordy Swibble. He did score in this game, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Sean Hundle is just being like, and I don't think it's being honestly talked about that much that I've seen in the CPL spheres right now, how much of a disappointment he's been for Valour, because the way that he was brought in, the way that we took his signing, he was supposed to be the main man.
Yeah, he looked like his skill set was exactly what they were looking for compared to what they had last year. And things have changed slightly in the way they're playing, obviously. But yeah, he's not been the same player as he was at the beginning of the season last year with Vancouver. But it's a nicely taken goal, and that third, like to lose the game, it's just infuriating, I think, and it's just the bad luck that I think more as much as anything else. Like, obviously trying to get their head on it and the defending, but he's not exactly a confident defender. His skills are down the other end of the pitch, and it's a good ball in from Adonai Jareed, I think it was, and but yeah, he's just directed it in, and yeah, you see him take one step forward, and then you see how this affects his confidence going into the next one, where it's 2 steps back again.
Yeah, and overall, I mean, you can look at the match and see that the fact that Valour did come back to score 2 goals. Jordy Swibble in the beginning of the second half managed to get his goal, and he had been threatening pretty much the entire match. Like, even towards the end of the first half, when Valour were getting a little bit more into it, you could see Jordy Swibble start to test Zadrovic a little bit more. But then his goal in the 63rd minute, that is just a superb finish. That is a striker in full confidence. The curl on that, to be able to, like, it felt suspended in the air. Like, it wasn't thumped in. It was just so well placed. It wrapped around the outside of the post and then came back in. The flight of it was just beautiful. And there was absolutely no chance for the short-term goalkeeper Zadrovic to be able to get any hand on it. But 63 minutes in, a really improved performance from Valour at the beginning of that second half. It felt like that was the Valour that we had been seeing for a little while. But then again, they just started to tail off afterwards. It felt like they equalized it, and you would expect them to go and kick on, and they tried for a little bit, but then Pacific started to go back into it and start to put a little bit more pressure on. And in the end, they got their goal, but it just felt like it had been coming a little bit. And that was another disappointing thing for me from Valour. It wasn't just the first 45 minutes, but it was how they ended the second half with how brightly they started. I think they'll be sorely disappointed with that as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's a bad way to lose. And the fact that you've got back into the game and dropped off again towards the end is not what Phil DeSantis would have wanted, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, and I mean, he can take a lot of positives from this match. You know, the fact that his side were able to come back, it shows that they can compete. It's just they need to start the game well. They need to be able to manage the game well, and it's tough because, like we mentioned, you know, this team is only starting to really gel now. They've only started to have training sessions at home pretty much in the last couple of weeks, while other teams have been able to do it since February or March. So it's not going to be, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're not expecting Valour to put on these incredible performances right away after coming back home. But at the same time, I think it does show that he still has a lot of work to do. And while we're only 10 match days in, it's still, you know, we're still, you know, a month away essentially, for 4 match days away from being halfway through the season already.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, you can forgive them for their rough start because of all the conditions that they had. But, you know, the pity of the masses is not going to get you into the playoffs. You need to start delivering soon. And I think that he'll have a lot of valuable lessons from this. But shifting now to Pacific's performance, it was a much improved attacking display from Pacific. Something that we've been clocking them for a few weeks now is that they've been quite stale in the attack, and I was really excited to see the return of Rion Moore, because the Pacific have been needing that kind of focal point in the attack, and since they lost him to the red card and international duty, it's felt like they haven't been able to have as much of the directness and that focal point in the attack. What did you make of his return to the lineup and Pacific's attacking displays in this match?
I think he's a player that's still working his way in because of that long break out of the team. Still taking time to sort of form these partnerships with the players on the pitch, and we'll see where he can get to as the season goes on. But yeah, it's still early days.
Yeah. But I thought that they had a lot better attacking display, and they could have scored 3 or 4. But also in the defense, I thought they were pretty good. Obviously, a little bit of moments in the game where they allowed, you know, Valour to concede, or Valour to score, and for themselves to concede. A little bit of bad luck on the first goal because of TMG taking it away from that Luke, and then the second goal, I don't know how much more you could do. No. Yes, you could. I guess you could have a player to close them down, but Pacific were still kind of organizing, so they were a little bit slow in getting back into the shape, which opened up the opportunity for Jordy Swivel to have that shot. But I still think that, you know, any coach would probably look at that and be like, that's less on us and more on just the brilliance of the player on that one. So don't think you can you know, put too much critique on the defense. I thought they were pretty much solid overall today. Just those a few weak little moments, and I think a really solid performance from Zadric, from the young goalkeeper. You know, he's from Victoria native, so he's a homegrown boy. He spent the last 5 seasons with the UNBC Timberwolves and U Sports, and like you mentioned, he does know Pacific quite well because he's been training with them this season, and he's worked with the Pacific goalkeeper coach Trevor Stiles since he was 11. So it's not like it's I mean, still probably a daunting environment, but not an unfamiliar one for him. Yeah. So great for him, personally for him and his family, and for Victoria football to see another local homegrown kind of step into a big role like this and have a nice performance. So it was very nice to see for him. But yeah, I think overall Pacific, they made it tough for themselves, you could argue, in getting this victory. But I think overall, if you look at both halves, a deserved victory for the BCC.
Yeah, no, I'll go with that as well.
But now, looking forward, Valour, again, good response, a lot of positives, but I feel like for them, they're still trying to find a little bit of that issue with consistency. And, you know, the saying is consistency comes with time.
I'm going to cut you off. They're not going to have any. They won't have any this year. There won't be no consistency. Just enjoy the ride.
Okay. There you go. There we go. There's the answer to the question. Will there be consistency? No. Okay, fair enough. Then I guess it's just going to be a roller coaster ride with ups and downs, and it's going to be a thrill the whole way. Well, there you go. If there's any neutrals out there who are wanting to, choose a team that maybe is not so much around success or money, but more about just the thrill of the ride, you're looking at it right there with Valour FC. Then I guess we'll move on to Pacific then. But yeah, Pacific a bit better with goal scoring overall, like I mentioned. Now it's just about game management a little bit more. Feel like losing a couple of the leaders, especially in the goalkeepers. Goalkeepers are so huge for organizing defenses and making sure that they're in the right positions. And Zadrovic is not a bad goalkeeper, but to have even a leader like Sean Melvin or Emil Gazdov, as young as he is, because he's been here so long, he's comfortable with helping and talking with that back line and not having Ali and Dom in there. I feel like we're going to be talking about that week in, week out for Pacific. It obviously takes its toll a little bit in their defensive organization, but it's more about just keeping your head on straight, especially in defensive transitions for Pacific. Because now I think if they can have these goal-scoring moments, they should be pretty good to go on a little run now.
Yeah, I mean, they're a good team, but they're not one of the best teams at the moment. Like, they've got tools in there to be better than what they are at the moment. And the issue is other teams can be better than they are as well. Like, so it can go either way. So at the moment, they're sort of like, I'd say like a fourth place sort of team, which you could see getting a bit higher. But if other teams play really well, then you could see them dropping a little.
Yeah. I think the best thing for them is that if they can continue in this sort of form and they take advantage of the fact that some other teams that you would think would be up there in third or fourth position right now are still trying to find their feet 10 match days in, like the likes of Cavalry and Halifax. It's great for them to be able to take advantage of that and start to put some points on the board so that when things get maybe a little bit more hairy towards the end of the season, they have these, this credit in the bank and these points on the board to help them stay towards that third or fourth position. So it's really just about, keeping the good times rolling for Pacific FC. But now we're going to move on to the second match of the weekend. If the first match was the most entertaining, I would say the second match was probably the most shocking, because Atletico Ottawa have finally been beaten in the CPL. It took 10 times of asking for a CPL side to beat the capital city club, and it finally occurred, and in Ottawa's own backyard, which I will say was very, very shocking. I thought if they were going to lose a match, it would be away from home, but no, it was in the capital where they lost, and it was the scoreline of 2-1 to York United. York United, again, I think if you would have chosen any team to have beaten Ottawa at home, I don't think York United would have been high up there on your list. But Benjamin Mora, this era is proven to start quite well with a draw and a win so far. A brace from Brian Wright in the 36th minute and the 49th minute got York United going, and Amir Didic made it a little bit of a nervy finish for the York side in the 69th minute, but York did manage to hold on for all 3 points by the end of it.
Yeah, just about.
And just about. They a couple of heroics at the end, but we'll get there. It's just incredible that for me that I kept asking the last few weeks, what can stop Ottawa, and we found it. We found that what can stop Ottawa, and his name is Brian Wright. That is apparently the key to stopping Ottawa, is having a player like Brian Wright. Yeah, he loves it. He loves it there, and it's just, I feel like this weekend reminded some players really have favorites that they love to score against, and Brian Wright loves to score against Ottawa. So for York United, they started this match again. Benjamin Mora and this sort of kind of three at the back with wingback, sort of a five at the back, if you could say, as well, with a three in the midfield and the two up top. We saw Juan Cordova again in the midfield, even though he's a wingback, And taking his place at his natural wingback position was a midfielder in Brem Sumaru. Was that a little bit of a shock to you? Because I know it was for me when seeing the way that Jurgen had lined up.
Yeah, but I think that he's more has looked at. I mean, everyone's having to, and everyone's having to make bold decisions. Really, I mean, we keep saying, "How on earth do you stop this team?" And it's bold decisions, and all I can imagine. Looking back at this, I haven't listened to any interviews with him. I was speaking with him afterwards. Whether he just saw that Brem Sumaru would physically be a stronger player on that side of like dealing with the way Ottawa are attacking, and just saw like his size and his strength on as like dealing with those wingers coming in and the fullbacks. Obviously, it was Sissoko. Right back. This
Yeah,
week.
it was Sissoko, a right wing back.
Yeah, so I think he looked at that and was looking at the players that he has at wing back, and we just saw that Cordova. Okay, well, your ball playing. We need to be quicker getting forward. We noticed that Didic and Luke Singh just looks so slow compared to Austin Ricci. And Brian Wright, we've commented on about his movement is like even better than last year's. And I think they just looked at Cordova and thought, you can ping these balls a lot quicker than what Sumaru can. Sumaru can do it, but I think he's not as fast. He receives it, looks up, whereas Cordova's taking a touch and ping. It's gone. And they're putting Ottawa under pressure with sort of these transitional moments. And looking at it in hindsight, that's what I assume that his plan was. And I mean, kind of it worked.
No, yeah, it worked really well. And I'll be honest, I don't think it went this way, but I wouldn't be surprised if you saw the Ottawa lineup and saw Sissoko at the right wing back and be like, okay, Cordova, Sumaru switch. Yes, we want Sumaru to deal with Sissoko. And to be fair, like he did quite well against Sissoko. I was surprised by Ottawa how they lined up because there was still no Ruben Del Campo, even though he's been on fire at the beginning. Hasn't been scoring all that much in the last couple of weeks, but apparently Carlos Gonzalez decided to go for a top two of Ollie Bassett and Sam Salter. And to be fair, Sam Salter, I think he had a pretty decent first half, but I was a little bit surprised that Del Campo wasn't there. And as well, Sissoko at that right back position instead of Chris Twardek, who was another fantastic player for Ottawa towards the beginning of the season. And on the lineup, like the way that One Soccer put it as a 4-4-2, and I was very confused because I was like, Ottawa, I don't think would ever play in a 4-4-2. It was more of a 3-4-3 in possession, which makes a lot more sense with the wing backs pushing up, Ollie going a little bit wide, and Sam Salter still being that focal point. But still, it wasn't as convincing a side in the way that we saw Danny Morer also start, which he's a good player, but I feel like it wasn't the strongest side from Ottawa. I'm curious to see if maybe Carlos Gonzalez wanted to try something a little different. We know that in this league, coaches have to consistently try new things and surprise each other because you face the same team so many times a year. You can't just be one note. So I wonder if it was a little bit of that. From Carlos Gonzalez. I don't think necessarily it was the wrong choice, the wrong selection, but it was a little bit of a surprising one from Ottawa, given how well the starters that have been starting have been playing.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think one of the things that you say, like managers have to do new things to so they don't get found out doing the same thing over and over again. But I also thought Sam Salter, when he came on, like when he gets his start as an example of one of these players, he looked like he was still a bit rusty. Like his finishing wasn't great, but he was doing, the movements were fine, but technically it wasn't as he would have expected and as he was doing in previous last season, because Del Campo's had his spot. So he's having to get these players playing because you can't just play the same 11 all season, because Del Campo gets injured in, say, a month's time, and Sam Salter's been on the bench getting 5 minutes for the first half of the season. He's not going to be ready, and we see now he needed this game, and he's hopefully it will then build up from his perspective, and he'll get his sharpness back and things like that. You've got to make these changes, and I think because we got so used to Ottawa as this like this 11 of sort of super players, like CPL wise, like that is you need to use your squad, and Carlos Gonzalez is having to do that a lot more now, and I think that's just what we're gonna see, sort of changes and rotations around to keep everyone fresh.
Yeah, and I feel like that's probably the case of why Salter was starting. And like I mentioned, I thought he had a decent game. Like you mentioned, his movements were good. It was just, yeah, I feel like his shots were missing a little bit of venom. I think maybe he had a little.
Well, I think that so much great work, and he won the ball back, like, and he like right in the penalty box, and he cuts back inside on his right, and it just wasn't a hit like at all. But everything else building up to that was great work by him. So there's really nice, just bit by bit.
And there was that one chance that he had. I in the first, I think it was towards the end of it after York's opener, but it was like Mateo de Brienne. His work rate was it was incredible. Where basically got pushed off the pitch and still managed to go around, get the ball, and be able to pass it to Sam Salter. So he's getting these opportunities. It's just about, can he be able to emulate what we've seen from Del Campo? Obviously, they're different players, but the biggest thing that Del Campo had was just confidence. He had that confidence, and that allowed him to have just a little bit more composure on the ball, a little bit more decisiveness in your strike, a little bit more power and placement. And that, I think, is, Sam Salter needs a little bit more of that. But I think in the first half, obviously both sides are sort of getting into it. Ottawa were starting to put the pressure on, but I think it was very, very smart for York that as soon as they won back possession, they try to go as quickly as possible at Ottawa, because they know that the wingbacks are pushing up. They're in this sort of 3-4-3, and if they can get into these spaces in between the center back specifically, they'll have these opportunities. And it was lucky for them that it was an off day for Ottawa, and specifically their back line, because on the first goal, they basically just cut through Ottawa with two passes. And Austin Ritchie completely outpaced his marker to get onto the end of that like long ball, but there was too much space in between the defenders to allow Ritchie to be able to do that. And then Ritchie puts a cross through, and I found it so funny, the goal from Brian Wright in that one, because Ritchie finds Brian. He does a very, very cheeky finish, a kind of one touch, almost like a wedge shot in golf, where you just kind of like hit at the underside with no follow through, and it kind of just chips and cascades into the back of the net. What I loved about that goal, though, was Austin Ritchie, because he made that pass and then he just stood like a statue. I don't know if you saw it in the replay, but he did not move a muscle. He put that pass and he was like, "I give it to you. I am now just watching." If I was the manager, I'd be fuming if it didn't go in. If there's a follow-up and you're not following it, then that's a wasted opportunity. You should have been there. The fact that he just stood there and watched, and then it was almost like as soon as the ball went in, he was activated, and then he started celebrating, was quite funny. But a good goal from New York and a fantastic finish from Brian Wright. That's again, confidence is such a huge thing from a striker. That is a confident finish from Brian Wright. A lot of players will try to hit that with the inside of the boot and go for power or try to place it. And when the keeper's closing you down like that, they almost have the advantage. So you have to lift it over them. And he did that spectacularly. And really good finish from Brian Wright. Hilarious from but uncharacteristic mistakes, I think, from Ottawa in that war. Just a little bit schoolboy, which we haven't seen from Singh and Didic with how great they've been in the season so far. It was a little bit surprising.
Yeah, but I think this is the bit the way York set up, like, great credit to them. They've set up ways where they could hit them on the break, and that's the way they've decided to come at this game. And this week it's worked. Like, a bit of pace, like you say, when the fullbacks get high, you could be 2-on-2 in a quick transition. Yeah,
and then they managed to go York United into the break with that lead, withstanding a little bit of the Ottawa pressure. I feel like Ottawa hadn't fully turned on at that match at that point. And I fully expected Ottawa to come into the second half as the better team, go and get that equalizer, and then push on to find a second. But it did not turn out that way. Actually, York United came out, I think, as a team with a little bit more intensity, and they got rewarded with that like 4 minutes inside the second half, and there was again some schoolboy errors from the defense. This time it was Sissoko, which quite what you give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt that he was, he's a midfielder, he's not really a defender. But as the ball gets played in behind the defense, everyone's raising their hand thinking it's offside. Didic is on the other side of him thinking that, with Luke Singh and everybody, everybody's in line. But Sissoko is he's sort of just moseying on behind him in the box, just kind of keeping an eye on the player behind him, but he's not really running to get in line. So the line is not straight, and he's playing Brian Wright onside. And as soon as that ball goes through, the entire Didic is raising his hand, being like it's offside, and then Brian Wright just takes that first time, and a fantastic finish again from him. And I'm starting to be convinced that Brian Wright is better when he has less time to think as a striker than when he has time to think. I think that's the key to Brian Wright's goal scoring form, is that you give him less time to think and just hit it, and he'll actually perform better than when he has to deal with more touches. But 2-0 at that point, and you thought, okay, this might be it for Ottawa.
But they came at him and at him and at him. I mean, I think the bar possibly is still shaking from Tabla's strike.
Oh yeah,
Aparicio, you see him head on the post after failing to bring in the ball over the top, and it was just incessant and some great saves at times from Vincenzini. But they just really went for it. It was just one of those days. It's just it's not coming today, guys. Didic got his one great strike from 50 yards later on, trying to get a second, and it just didn't slow down. By the time it reached Vincenzini, it was just incessant, and they just held on somehow. York. I mean, this new manager bounce luck was very much in effect.
That's exactly what I was thinking. The new manager bounce was in full effect in this one, because the 2-0 went, and then York United kind of sat back a little bit, and Ottawa were realizing we're gonna actually lose here, and so they start to really go for it. And that tablet chance, I almost wish that went in, just because it was such a beautiful passing play before him. Really, really good build-up, completely unlocked the York United defense and structure. If they had a skeleton key, just completely unlocked the side. And then it's so unlike Tabla. We know Tabla loves to put power behind his shots, but it's so unlike him to miss an opportunity like that. And just rattle the crossbar, and it was pretty much shaking for the rest of the half. And then a really good pass, like you mentioned, to Aparicio, completely left alone. He just chests it down too much and puts it right for Vincenzini. They did get a goal in the end, and I don't know if Amir Didic was watching highlights from 2012 Europa League when Radamel Falcao was playing for Atletico Madrid, but that is a classic Radamel Falcao. Just a Cruyff turn and side foot finish into the roof of the net. That was saw that goal
in slow motion, but
it was in slow motion. It was in slow motion, but still, the techers to do that. I literally blinked and I was like, "Is that Radamel Falcao in his prime?" A really good goal, and from a center back too. Incredible. But and then I think afterwards, I don't know if it was because Ottawa were getting so, I guess, desperate, but they were taking a lot of shots from long range, which is not usually their MO. They love to obviously pass it around and be able to pass it inside the box, create those high quality chances. But they just start to get a little bit panicky. And to be fair, some of the shots were really, really good. Just Vincenzini was equal to them and made some pretty big saves. But I think that was the first time this season, barring maybe that one game where they surrendered a lead, in week 2 or 3. It was the first time this season when I saw Ottawa truly, truly desperate and not playing in the way that they have been playing for most of the season.
Yeah, and York just filled up that box, like in front of the box, the midfield and the defensive line were just really well organised, and like there's some, like you say, that couple of like really good bits of football created some chances that were missed, but otherwise they just found it really hard to break them down.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, again, credit to York United because they did hold on. Obviously, they rode their luck a little bit, but still, it's 4 points from the 2 matches that Benjamin Mora has been in charge for, and this is probably one of the biggest of them all that they have had, and they maybe will have in this season because of the form that Ottawa have been in. I think that for Ottawa, I don't want to read too much into it because it just felt like it was just an off day.
We're not going to win every game.
Yeah, exactly. They were due an off day at some point. Obviously, again, this fixture would not have circled as the one that they were going to have an off day against. But yeah, just off day for the defense a little bit, off day for the attack a little bit, and you're going to have that. I don't think it's it's alarm bell time or anything for Ottawa, but now. I'm very curious because now we get to see a new situation for Ottawa where they have to bounce back from a loss. You could say that when they lost to Pacific in the Canadian Championship, that was maybe the first time, but in the league, first time that they have to bounce back from a loss in the league to have a good response. So I'm curious how they do next week. I don't know. I can't.
They're off to Cavalry.
They're off to Cavalry. Oh, that's going to be a good one then. Because, with Cavalry in their form right now, that's going to be actually a pretty tasty matchup there. But yeah, for York, have you been impressed with Benjamin Mora and the way that he's been able to set this team up and have some success? This new formation and the players, and then some of the new roles that they have.
Yeah, you can't help but be impressed. Like, it's off to a really good start. Like he's making tactical decisions that are going to bring sort of breath of fresh air into the league, like, because it's a whole new way of playing, a whole new manager who no one in the league probably knows that much about outside of York United. So it's just going to add a bit of fun, I think, for everyone watching. Like, all us neutrals going in, like they host Pacific next week. James Merriman's got to come up with a way of trying to deal with what York do, like, and they haven't. Like, you planned for Martin Nash, like at the beginning,
very true.
Started, and this is very different. Like, Moba Bully's like not this. Oh, everything has to go through him, and we'll be fine. All of a sudden, players are picking up different roles. People are doing things in different ways, and it looks like York United players have all bought into what he's doing. There seems to be a lot of like commitment into like believing like that he's got the right ideas about how to improve this team, and at the moment when you've got all the players on board, it helps even more, doesn't it?
Yeah, and if you look at the table, I mean, they're level on points with Forge, and they're only one. They've played one more game than Forge, but they're level on points with Forge, only 2 points away from Pacific on level games. So if Benjamin Mora can go on a little bit of a run, we could see York United surge up the table. So definitely exciting times if you're a York United fan. And yeah, I'll be curious to see, obviously once every team has played this new York United once, how Benjamin Mora freshens things up as he gets to learn about, the biggest trouble, I think, for coaches that don't know the Canadian Premier League is you face the same team 4 times. You need to freshen things up at some point. So it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that. But overall, pretty good match, pretty decent match.
Yeah, really good.
Now we're going to move on to the third match, which was Halifax Wanderers against Forge FC in Halifax at the Wanderers grounds. And would you believe it? Another late goal denies Halifax Wanderers from their first win of the season. It is heartbreak after heartbreak. Yeah. It's like watching a Titanic marathon. It's just every time that it's on, that you're going to feel sad by the end. But a thrilling match for the neutrals. 2-2 in that one as well. Massimo Ferran, his first goals of the season against his favorite opponents. That one, you could have predicted who, or like if you had to say which game he was going to open his account against, you could have easily said the home game against Forge FC, and he got 2, not just 1. He scored in the 52nd and 65th minute to complete a turnaround for Halifax after Betty Banga opened the account in the 49th minute. And then it was Kwasi Poku, who has scored important goals, some big important late goals for Forge this season already, coming up with another one in the 92nd minute. If you're a Halifax fan, I'm sure you're going to want to turn away from this one, but they just need to hold on.
Yeah.
They just need to hold on to the final whistle. I don't know. I truly at this point don't know what it is beyond just mental fatigue. I'm curious. I wrote this down just before we start recording, and that it's starting to remind me a little bit this issue of mentality of Ottawa at the end of last season when they kept giving up goals late on. It was at such a pattern that it felt like that wasn't just like a tactical issue, that was a mentality issue. And it's sort of reminding me the same thing with Halifax in this case, where it's just they're doing good performances, but they just can't see them out. Is that sort of was that be how you're feeling as well?
I do think there's a bit of that, and definitely I think one thing I'm noticing from watching this team though is when they're put under like a consistent bit of pressure, their defense aren't organized and resolute. They're defending bravely, they're doing really well a lot of the time, but it seems like everything's on last ditch. It's like desperate defending, but we'll fight and we'll make sure the crowd's behind us, and it's great. At no point am I watching this team at the moment, and like I said about Valour earlier in the show, like their defense isn't set up to defend and protect. It's just reacting to what the hell's happening. Like, right, I'm throwing myself in. Like, they've got good players, but they just don't look well drilled and well organized at the moment. I think Fernandez is having a poorer season than he did last year. Not to say he's playing bad because he played so well last year, but he's not in as good a form as he was in, and I think that's because he's not being able to do what he was doing last year because the central defenders aren't performing the way they did last year. Julian Dunn's come in. There's been obviously changes. Dan Nimick missing again, and they started with this back 3. They're back to the back 4, and it just doesn't look like they're comfortable, and they're not in a position where they'll go, well, okay, we're going to come under pressure, but let's keep our positions and we can deal with this. It's okay, we're under pressure, right? You go here, you take him.
Yeah, it is. It does seem a little bit disorganized, which is something that we hadn't really seen from Patrice Geyser. He's been, last season he was quite good at getting his team organized. It was just about sustainability issues at the beginning of last season. In this, so far in this season, at least in the last few weeks, you can't even look at the games and say that they've not deserved a win, because I feel like they've at least deserved something a little bit more. I mean, they've picked up points, they've gotten some draws at the very least, but the fact that haven't been able to get more than 4 points on the board because of their 4 draws is harsh, I think, on them, and especially their performances that they've been able to do. But yeah, I think it's sort of like a little bit of a trickle down effect, and I see that happen a lot with teams mentally. Is that if a certain if the center backs aren't playing well, that means that the wing backs or the full backs aren't able to maybe go up as much because they have a little bit of reservation of staying back, and then they can't influence the game further up the pitch, which isolates the attacking players more. And then because the attacking players more isolated, the forwards can't get the chance that they need to score the goals, and it's like this kind of trickle down effect that affects pretty much the entire team. And at a certain point, something's got to give, something's got to break, but it just feels like they're not quite there yet. And I know Patrice Geyser mentioned at the end of the match, it's all about perspective and the way that you look at things. You can look at the performances or you look at the results. But I do feel like at a certain point, you got to marry the two. You got to have good performances, get those good results. And at a certain point, you can't keep pointing towards bad luck. You got to kind of point towards yourself and the team and the players. because this team needs a win desperately.
Yeah.
Needs a win for the players, for the coach, and his job security, for the fans, because they're too good of a team to be on this poor of a run. But let's actually delve into the game a little bit more. We saw the weather. For those that watched the game, the weather
Yeah.
was not fantastic. I mean, depending on how you like. If you like basically swimming on the pitch when you're playing football, then maybe it was perfect conditions for you. But it was a little bit of a tough one to play comfortably for a lot of time, and I feel like that actually did affect Forge more than Halifax, because Forge
Yeah.
were not that great in the opening half hour, maybe even the full 45. They had quite a few giveaways from the defense to Halifax that Halifax should have probably done better for. It felt both. I think both of them giveaways that Forge had fell to Giorgio Probo, who was a bright spark, I think, for Halifax in the game, especially in the first half. But they just needed, again, a little bit more decisiveness. Feel like some of the players maybe are a little bit too in their head when they get the ball, because they're so desperate to score and so desperate to get the result across. But I think the weather definitely took a toll for Forge, and Forge, we saw a couple surprises in the lineup. Obviously, on Pomo, we saw on the bench, which is great for Forge. He's a player that we've been waiting on seeing for quite some time now because of visa issues. And another surprise was no Malik Oluwabi-Belawu in the starting 11. Garvin Matusala came back in after serving international duty, and we didn't see Malik till the 78th minute. And I don't know if it's only because he wasn't playing, but it did feel like Forge's defense looked worse without Malik
Yeah.
Oluwabi-Belawu in the middle of it.
I'd have him over Matusla every day. Like the way he's come out and played, like he's a much more. Like he's just performing at a much higher level than Matusla at the moment, and he's got that added pace where he can recover quicker, and he's done less of laying the ball off for strikers than so in that game. But I just think he's been fantastic. So I can just keep playing him.
Yeah, no, me too, and I understand. You need to give other players opportunities. You need to make sure that they're keeping up with their match sharpness, because if Oluwabi-Belawu, and the same conversation we had with Salter just now, if the player that's really informed gets injured, you need the players off the bench to be able to perform, and they can only do that if they get some game time. So completely understandable why Bobby Smirniotis decided to go with Matusala over Malik in that one. But still, I thought that it might have been a contributing factor as well for Forge's poor start, at least in the defense. To be fair, Forge probably should have had one or two goals as well in the first half. David Chouanier probably should have made better with that chance that he had that hit the crossbar. Kyle Becker had a couple of opportunities as well to score. Jan Fillion, I think, in the entire match, had a really good match for him. Came up with some pretty big saves. But I think going into halftime, would you have said that 0-0 was probably a fair result? Or did you think that maybe Forge had a little bit more, since they at least got the ball on target, had a little bit more reason to feel hard done by?
Yeah, I think Forge were the slightly better team, but wasn't a great first half. No. I don't think either team deserved anything out of that first half. So thank God for the second half.
Yeah, no, that's the crazy part too. All 4 goals came in the second half. So if you fell asleep in the first one, hopefully you woke up for the second one, because that's when all of the action had. And it was Halifax that scored first. Oh no, it was Forge that scored first rather than 49th minute. And again, something that we've seen from Halifax defensively, and going a little bit to what you were saying, was that the way that they're organized. I'm never a big fan of a team that likes to drop so deep so quickly, because it allows so many opportunities for late runners and for players to be able to get onto the end of the crosses that are in your blind spot. And that's what I feel like happened in the opening goal. Great player from Forge. I'm pretty sure that kind of play is like, there's some things that they do off the training ground. The slick play that Kyle Becker sent to, I think it was Chouanier on the right, to be able to get in behind, and it was a good cross in, but immediately as Chouanier went in behind, you saw the Halifax defense almost be in line with him, and that gave so much space for any attacker, not just Benny, but any attacker making a late run to be able to get on the end of it. And it's something that we've seen from Halifax a few times this season, where the defense drops a little too deep too quickly, and they don't sort of angle themselves in the right direction, and ends up getting punished. And that's what happened in the opening goal for Benny Bengal. A really good finish from Benny, because he kind of had to dive for the header and flick it on. But yeah, a little disappointing for Halifax to be able to concede it, but they didn't have to wait too long, because then literally 3 minutes later, Massimo Ferrin got a little bit of a lucky, I guess you could say, goal, in the sense that maybe Clement Bahia should have been the one to finish it off, since it was great play from him, and it was a great performance from him overall.
Really quick feet. I love that. How quickly he got the ball out the way, is like players around him, goalie flying through, would have been a penalty, but
100%.
Ferrin tucks it away, but it's such quick feet, and Bahia's in a really good spot for Halifax, and if he could well be like really important to them turning things around, like being more consistent up front.
Yeah, I truly think he could take a little bit of like that Callum Watson goal that we saw last season, where Callum Watson sometimes pops up with a goal or two to kind of lift the team out when they're struggling a little bit. You need the kind of impact player, and the same thing with Clement Bahia, because he has such quick feet. He's so technically skilled, and he's so rapid as well. He's such a dangerous player. I feel like he's perfect for what Halifax have been missing a little bit this season. So yeah, really good pickup.
You've usually got Ferrin playing every game, and then Daniels and Watson used to sort of rotate. Neither of them seem to be able to do an entire 90 minutes of putting a team under pressure. So like Aidan Daniels isn't going to stretch the game, but he can be good on the ball technically. Now you can then use that with Bahia of like rotating it around. Okay, we need someone that's going to be a little bit like get them on the ball. We need Daniels in now. Or if it's like, okay, well now we need to make the pitch even bigger and longer. Let's get Bahia in and get him past the defense and making the pitch bigger for players like Caligari maybe coming up. So he's got a couple of options now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something that he will Patrice guys will definitely need is having those options off the bench, different profiles that give different dynamics in the attack, because that's what they're going to require if they're going to want to get out of this rut. But then as soon as that goal came in, Halifax came to life, and it wasn't that much later before Massimo Ferrin got his second, courtesy of a really rash challenge from Malcolm Duncan in the box. Great play from Halifax there. Rampersand, who I think just came on, fizzed the ball towards Ryan Telfer. Telfer with a nifty little back heel to lay off Ferrin. Ferrin did really well to kind of take it and get past Malcolm, and then Malcolm just kind of hauled him down.
I'm not just clapping.
No, rogue fly. But yeah, Malcolm Duncan just kind of brought him down, and it was very clearly a penalty, a very, very silly challenge from Malcolm Duncan. But Massimo Ferrin stepped up. Really good penalty again, 2-1, and it looked like it almost was the fairy tale we have been hoping for Halifax. A brilliant comeback, and the way that Halifax were defending, you could see that they really, really wanted it. Yes, it wasn't maybe as trademark as you would want a performance from the defense. It felt a little bit panicky, but I mean, can you blame them? They were so desperately trying to hold on for the win. But then, the 92nd minute, there was only 3 minutes. I think it was 5 minutes of out of time. So almost basically right at the very end. Heartbreak, the Kwasi Poku goal. We saw Nana Opoma finally make his first appearance for Forge. Came on and around the 66th minute, I believe. And arguably himself should have had a goal. He had a really, really good cameo. Created a chance off the corner. Had that opportunity to score as well. And then got this opportunity where he just burst down the left and laid it off for Kwasi Poku. And again, for the Halifax defense, don't want to be too critical. But it was just a case of them again, maybe dropping a little bit too deep, but more than anything, the defensive midfielders were nowhere to be seen. Like there was no one tracking back for the late runners. And so the defense had to not only take a look at, who is behind them directly in the box, but also who was coming into the box, trying to get caught in two minds of should I block the cross or should I mark the man? And in the end, it kind of cost them as the ball went through. And you can see sliding challenges everywhere, but Kwasi Poku managed to find that yard of space. He just flick to just kind of like redirect it with the inside of his foot and go into the back of the net. And you saw how dejected Halifax were on that goal. And against a team like Forge, that is always a possibility. You can never let your guard down with Forge. It doesn't matter what minute of the game it is. It doesn't matter how many goals you've scored. Forge will always have that determination and that just willingness and never say die to be able to get back into games. And it was unfortunate for Halifax that it occurred once again. But so many things happened in that second half, Mike. But for you, were you more impressed with what Halifax were able to offer, or the fact that Forge managed to get a late equalizer right at the very death?
I think I'm more impressed that Halifax fought back, but I think it was weird. It was just such a weird game with the because of the weather. Like, so it's one of those ones that's just quite sort of a standalone kind of game.
Yeah. And I mean, again, a lot of things that you can take away from it, especially if you're a Halifax supporter. Positives you can take away. It was a good performance in the second half. Maybe not your best performance in the first half, but a really, really good response in the second half. And it's just a little bit frustrating because, I mentioned that Patrice Geyser talked about perspectives and how perspectives matter. But you can only have so many good performances with poor results until people stop caring about the good performances. And yes, you could say that they're unlucky not to have at least one win so far this season. But I mean, football is cruel. Football, it doesn't care about the maybes or the ifs or the shoulds. It just is what it is. And so for me, like looking at what they've been able to achieve this season, it's still not enough for me to just say, yeah, they've had bad luck, but they'll sort of bounce back and it'll be fine. It's like, no, I still think that they have work to do to be able to merit that win. And I think it honestly has to do more mental than anything on the training pitch and tactical. I don't know if you kind of have the same diagnosis.
I think he needs to organise his defence. I just don't think they're well organised enough and working well enough with the whoever's going to be playing just in front of them in midfield. At the moment, I think that's still a big thing. Like mentally going forward, there's a lot of issues like that. Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. But I don't trust their defence at the moment at all. Like it's not as bad as Valour, but at the same point, whenever I see Valour or Halifax go into games, I know they're going to concede some goals. They're going to concede a goal or some goals. I've got more belief usually in Halifax scoring goals, but still, but it's the same though. That's the issue defensively. I can still see them conceding each week.
Yeah, that's, I think, going to be something that he definitely needs to address. And in terms of goal scoring, Thiago Coimbra came back in at striker, but unfortunately had to be taken off injured. Same with Jeremy Gagnon-Laparé, so that gives a little bit more headache to Patrice Geyser. But maybe that gives an opportunity to Christian Walewski to step up. We've seen that he's kind of not really been in the equation the last few weeks for Patrice Geyser because he just simply hasn't been performing all that well. So maybe that's a good opportunity for him to kind of step up and in the coming weeks, if Coimbra is out for a little while, for him to, get a goal, get a good opportunity to score, and maybe help the team get their first win. I think that would be a huge boost of confidence, not only for the player, but for the team overall. And then to wrap up this game with Forge, they salvage a point, which is great. And they show that championship mentality. but they haven't really looked all that much at their best since the Canadian Championship. The huge games that they had against Montreal. They've still looked like they've either start or finish games just not that great, or at least there are periods of the games where they kind of lose their heads a little bit, and that I think you could say that's normal for any team, but for a team with such success and such a high standard like Forge have, I think it's something that is a little bit of a surprise at the very least. Maybe not necessarily a concern yet, but a little bit of a surprise. But I did really like Nana Opoma's cameo, and he maybe will be that spark that they need to help them out. What did you make of his cameo overall, and what he could bring to Forge?
Yeah, look fun. And that's they've got players who are good and entertaining, but it's nice getting someone new, fresh in, to sort of get everyone back on their toes. Going, okay, let's. They like you say, they haven't been at their highest level since those games. This one, I mean, it was shitty weather. It was so bad. I'll give them a slight break on that, but yeah, Apoma's introduction now should probably sort of reignite a little bit of motivation if there was ever any need for it amongst some of these Tristan Bordish, Schwanya, all these players, and they're like, our place isn't guaranteed. This guy's got some.
Yeah, no, competition always breeds success. So for him to come in and give a little bit more competition to those attacking players is going to be, only going to be good things for Forge, hopefully. But now let's move to the fourth and final game between Vancouver FC and Cavalry FC. A lot of hype, a lot of build-up in this one. Obviously, this was the CPL on tour to Kelowna match. And typical fashion for a game with so much build up to it, it ended a 0-0 affair. No better way to sell yourself to a bunch of potential CPL fans than selling a 0-0 affair. But it wasn't short of action. You could definitely say that there should have been at least 2 or 3 goals in it. Talk a little bit about the game, but I think honestly we'll probably talk more about the occasion and the implications more. But to talk, I think that one of the biggest things of this game was just both teams sort of were missing their shooting boots. Vancouver FC with a fantastic start. Honestly, that first half was probably one of the best that I have seen them play in quite some time. But they just couldn't finish their dinner. Alejandro Diaz had 2 massive misses in the game, and it's a little bit disappointing because you would say out of everyone on the pitch, he's the one that would put those away. He had the one where Marco Carducci, very uncharacteristic of him, made a mistake, lost possession, and Diaz had the goal at his mercy, and so many players around him that he could have passed to who had a better angle, but just fluffed his lines and sent it sailing. I don't know if you saw the video, but there was a kid that was running and then headed it away. And I was like, yes, that is all of us. That is all of us there. We all would love to do that. Though those balls are pumped so hard. I'm surprised that kid didn't have a headache for the rest of the match. But yeah, Alejandro Diaz had the best chances of the match. Leighton Brooks forced Callum Irving into a huge save.
How he didn't roll into the goal, I don't know.
Exactly.
He stopped on the line.
It was incredible. And the fact that Callum Irving still caught it, didn't just save it, but managed to catch it well was incredible. I don't know how much he knew about it, but we'll say that it was all part of the plan for Callum Irving. But yeah, Vancouver with an excellent first half, kind of trailed away in a little bit of the second half. Cavalry grew into it a bit more. Cavalry were rocking that sort of the 3 at the back formation, the 3-5-2 that we saw against Forge, and didn't start all that well, but it managed to come sort of good towards the second half, creating a bit more opportunities. I still think that on the face of it, Vancouver should have won that match. I mean, the combined XG was almost 2.5. We got 0 goals. So a little bit. Yeah, it was just a chaotic game overall. But yeah, a few decent performances. I like Thomas Powell and in his kind of first start. I thought he was pretty decent overall. But it probably was as exciting as a 0-0 game could be overall. But talking now about the occasion around it. This was, I think, it was no surprise to anyone what this actually was. CPL on tour for Kelowna was a test. It was
Yeah.
a test to see how many soccer-loving fans are actually in a city like Kelowna. Because it wasn't just the match; they had a lot of activities before the actual game with like youth soccer, and they had tents and things there for a while, like for a few weeks they've been there, kind of putting their name out so people could come to the game. And it turned out to be a success. I think it was like 6,851, something like that. Record for record attendance for a professional sports game at the Apple Bowl in Kelowna. So like it was a huge success for the people that put it on, for Rob Friend, who's from there, from the club itself, to be able to get everybody engaged, and even the mayor got involved to kind of help push this game. And it was a really good match. You saw the atmosphere, like so many people were there. It seemed like it was a success overall, and I know how much it meant to the organizers and to the club to be able to have that. Obviously, a little bit disappointing with the scoreline, but would you say overall that it was a success for testing Kelowna?
Definitely, like for Kelowna as a place, like you could see how, like, from the second the kids coming out with the mascots looked so excited to be walking out onto the pitch, and the fans kept going throughout the match. Like, they were having a great time, filled it. I'd suggest if they ever end up with a CPL team, they might want to make the pitch a little bit wider,
Yeah.
like, if they want to control any possession. But as a venue, and as an atmosphere, that kept the game going throughout. Like, there's nothing, no bad words you can say about it. It was really, really great to see. I mean, this is something that, like, obviously we mentioned at the beginning of the show, the CSP and MediaPro deals, like things need to be going, and this is something the CPL needs to start doing. Like, you can't just rely on your local market. Like, Canada's huge. They've got to be looking at different things, and we've got to try and find the best ways and the best places of building this league and finding the right markets to introduce new expansion sides. But it's going to be really, like, as much as this was really good fun, I don't know how fun it is for the Vancouver FC fans who lose a home game, because we've had this with Forge. When Forge wanted to put on the morning game to get the kids involved, there was obviously all those discussions about all these season ticket holders going, hang on, what about us? Like, we got to go to work. So they're like, it's a real balancing act the CPL needs to do, because they need to do that. Like, you've got to get there, and you've got to do these. Like, that morning game is a great idea to get these kids involved, like, and get to watch games and get them involved, interested in, if they have an interest in football already. Don't just support Toronto. Don't just support Montreal and the Whitecaps. Like, we've also got these teams that are right here, like, in building the league, and it's really, really important. And then, like, going out into the market, but you've got to protect those that are already fans. I mean, it's going to be really difficult for them to do. Like, I mean, this is the biggest test for the CPL, isn't it? I guess, of how they're going to manage this to expand.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you could, like you mentioned, there are obviously some logistical issues that they sort of introduced this after the regular season came out. So fans didn't know that a home game that they thought that they were paying for, specifically the season ticket holders, would essentially be relocated after the fact. So yeah, there are some things that could have been done better, but it was a huge test, and it was something that they needed to do, because Mark Noonan has been repetitively saying, we have plans, there are NDAs, there are interested parties, expansion is in the works, but there hasn't been anything tangible to show that that is actually something that it can occur. I think a lot of fans have been worrying that that the league is sort of in a plateau right now, where they're stuck at 8 teams. And even though we had Vancouver last season, we lost the Eddies the season before. So it's kind of like, we haven't really made all that much progress since 2021. It's going to be 2025 next year. So it's like 4 years without doing all that much. So I feel like this was huge, just as a relief of pressure on the league and the commissioner and all the interested parties, because it shows it's like, hey, no, we recognize that there's interest abroad. Let us show you that there's interest outside of the countries that already have clubs, and there are other cities that would love to have a club.
Yeah.
And I think the CPL tour idea is a fantastic way to do it. I think they need to do it more. They need to go to some of the other cities that we've been talking about for expansion, like Windsor in Ontario, like maybe Laval in Quebec, or even Montreal. Just these other cities, maybe another city in the Maritimes as well, to show that there is interest and there is a fan base and there is a market there for these clubs, not only for the fans, but also for potential investors to say, hey, look, Kelowna, look how well that went. Maybe we do want to invest in the CPL club, another CPL club in BC and Kelowna. And that kind of gets the ball rolling for the league, instead of just sort of promises and figures. It's like, no, here's like a very clear visual that there is interest here. Now it's just about marking it well and making it sustainable. And I think that's going to be the next step for the league, is that they've shown that it works for one game, fantastic. But now how do they make it work for a season?
Yeah.
How do they make it work for 3 seasons? How do they make it work for even longer, 10 seasons? Because now for a league like the CPL that's sort of past its infancy a little bit, it's just like, okay, how do we make this sustainable, like a sustainable growth past the 5-year mark to 10, 15, 20, 25? If we really want this to be a staple for Canada, we need to think about the long term. And so I think initiatives like this, if they're done a little bit better, are perfect.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Like you say, like it just needs to be better thought out in the whole planning, and it has to be sold to those who are already fans of CPL teams. Like to say, look, we're not just forgetting about you. We want to just get more people involved and build it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think overall great success, and hopefully we see a couple other CPL on tours in the future, though maybe hopefully done in a little bit a better way for the season ticket holders. But you live and you learn. You live and you learn for the league. Before we do wrap up, though, I want to talk about a quick point for Vancouver FC, which was around Alejandro Diaz. Alejandro Diaz, as we mentioned, 2 massive misses, hasn't been firing in all cylinders. A little bit better this season. I think he has 2 or 3 goals, but it's still not the player that I think Vancouver FC fans were hoping to get when they agreed that loan deal last year. And so now his loan deal is expiring in July, and we have no word, no update, no nothing on whether Alejandro Diaz is going to continue or not. At the end, I guess it's between him, Sogndal in Norway, and the club. But do you think, if you were Vancouver FC, I mean, I don't know if you have much better options, but looking at his performance, do you think Vancouver FC should kind of throw money at him and try to keep him on for another season, or maybe on a permanent deal?
The money is the important thing. He hasn't lived up to what they would have hoped. It depends. If you can get him back on loan for the rest of the season, I think you'd do it. But I don't think unless they have no other thoughts and options, and they've just they're putting all their eggs in this Diaz basket and saying, right, no matter what happens, we're going to try and sign him permanently come the end of the season. If they've surely been doing their scouting, and they've surely been coming up with contingencies for this. And maybe if they sign him, it kind of says to me that they hadn't done their homework and they hadn't done all the work they should have been doing. Because I think he's probably going to come at a high cost compared to what you could probably get if you're working hard to try and find someone else to bring in.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Can you find somebody else to bring in that can do that? Because he's still a quality player and he's good in the build-up and everything, but it's just, as a goal scorer, he's not quite there. And maybe that's not something that they're looking for right now, because they have Moses Dyer and he's been firing a little bit more than Diaz. Maybe then you just bring someone that can, or you keep Diaz because he can complement Moses Dyer more, or if Diaz does leave, then you just bring in someone that can complement Moses Dyer and can help him score more goals rather than shoulder the burden himself. Maybe that's a potential strategy for Vancouver. But yeah, big question marks around Diaz, and I will try myself to inquire to see what's going on there. So keep a sharp eye on that. But that is it for this week's roundup. Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast episode. Make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC so they can give us your thoughts on each of this week's episodes. And if you have any interesting facts, stats, or questions, we might shout you out on the next show. But until next time, I'm Felipe Vallejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC, signing out.